The loser at the table. You really think anyone with a minimum wage job should be giving life advice? My brother laughed, fork in hand, his voice slicing through the laughter and clinking glasses like a blade. Everyone at the Thanksgiving table froze. My mother coughed awkwardly. My father looked down at his plate, and I just sat there, smiling because if I opened my mouth, I might be said something I couldn't take back. The turkey was golden, the tablecloth spotless, and the air heavy with tension disguised as warmth. My brother, Ethan, had just returned from another business trip, the kind where he posted pictures in first class and tagged motivational quotes about grind culture. He was the golden child, always had been. The kind of man who made success sound like an exclusive club and he was the gatekeeper. Me? I was just working at a small startup doing product design, barely scraping by, or so they thought. No one at that table knew what I was really building toward. Not yet. Ethan leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine. I am just saying, Mom, he continued, smirking. Some people choose mediocrity. Others build empires. He looked at me like he was doing me a favor by including me in the conversation. You're still at that tech doodle job, right? Laughter followed. Not cruel exactly, but sharp enough to sting. I tried to shrug it off. Yeah, I said lightly. Still there. Still doodling. My sister-in-law chuckled. At least you were creative. Her tone said what she didn't. At least you were trying. It wasn't the first time my achievements had been dismissed like that. But this time it hit differently. Because 2 days earlier, an email had arrived. From a company I'd dreamed about working for since college. An $850,000 salary offer, plus stock options. I hadn't told anyone yet. Not even my friends. I wanted to savor that quiet, private victory before the world tried to twist it into competition. As the dinner dragged on, I watched Ethan brag about his new real estate investment, his new car, his new vision for leadership. He said it like he was auditioning for admiration. I used to envy that confidence, the way he could dominate a room, make people listen, make our parents beam with pride. But that night, something inside me shifted. While he talked, I realized he needed their validation like oxygen, and I didn't eat anymore. When dessert came, Mom leaned over to me quietly. Don't take it personally, she whispered. He just wants to feel important. I smiled at her, even though my chest ached. It is fine, I said. I've figured out something better than being important. She frowned. What is that? Being peaceful. And I meant it. Because I'd spent years chasing the same spotlight. Ethan lived under grades, degrees, approval, promotions. Every time I caught a little bit of it, it burned me. Now I was learning to build my own light quietly, slowly, but steadily. After dinner, Ethan caught me in the hallway. He grinned like a victor. No hard feelings, bro, he said, patting my shoulder. I am just trying to motivate you. Someone has got to keep you from wasting your potential, right? I looked him straight in the eye. Yeah, I said softly. Someone has gotta. He didn't notice the edge in my tone. He was too busy checking his reflection in the mirror. As he walked away, I felt that familiar heat rise in my chest. Not anger, but purpose. Because that night, I decided something. I wasn't going to prove him wrong out of spite. I was going to prove myself right. And when the moment came when he finally saw what I had built, I wouldn't gloat. I'd let the truth speak for itself. That night, as I drove home, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold. My phone buzzed a follow-up email from HR. We're excited to have you on board. Please confirm your start date. I laughed under my breath. A year ago, I'd have called my parents, my brother, everyone I knew. But now I just whispered to myself, let us see who X still laughing at the next Thanksgiving. And for the first time in years, I felt no need to rush. Because quiet success, the kind no one sees coming, is the sweetest revenge there is. Buried under expectations. There is something cruel about growing up in a house where love feels like a scoreboard. When Ethan and I were kids, everything was a competition: grades, trophies, even who got the bigger slice of cake. And the thing is, I didn't even want to compete. I just wanted peace. But in our home, peace looked a lot like losing. Dad was a corporate man, strict, sharp, and obsessed with outcomes. He believed success was simple math: effort, focus, victory. If I came home with a 95 on a test, he'd say, "What happened to the other 5 points?" Ethan, on the other hand, would show a 98 and Dad would beam like sunlight broke through the ceiling. Mom tried to balance things out, but even she would slip. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" She once sighed when Ethan brought home a science fair medal. That sentence buried itself deep inside me. It became the voice I heard every time I hesitated, every time I failed. By high school, Ethan was the golden boy everyone admired. He captained the debate team, won scholarships, and already talked like a CEO in training. Me? I was the quiet one. The kid who filled sketchbooks, coded small apps, and built little gadgets from broken toys. I didn't want to win, I wanted to understand. But in a house like ours, curiosity wasn't currency. Results were. "Art doesn't pay the bills," Dad said once, as I showed him my first design portfolio. "You need something practical." Funny thing, years later, that impractical passion would pay me more than his entire career ever did. But back then, I didn't know that. I just felt small. When Ethan went to Stanford, it was like the house lost its favorite son. The pride on my parents' faces when they dropped him off, I still remember standing on the driveway, waving goodbye as the car disappeared. Mom turned to me and said, "You will find your path too, honey." But I could see the unspoken words in her eyes. Just make it impressive. So I worked. I studied design and coding. I freelanced to afford tuition. While Ethan networked with VCs and startups, I was fixing laptops, drawing logos, and surviving off instant noodles. I envied his freedom, but I also pitied his need to show off. He lived like someone constantly auditioning for approval. And maybe that's the biggest difference between us. I learned to build things that lasted. He learned to build appearances. The first time I got a real job, an entry-level UX role at a small startup, Dad said, "So what do you actually do there?" I tried to explain. User experience design, prototypes, usability flows. But halfway through, I realized he wasn't asking out of curiosity. He was asking to measure my worth. When I told him the salary, barely $42,000 a year, he just nodded, disappointed. Well, at least it's honest work. Honest work. The phrase sounded like a consolation prize, but that job changed me. It humbled me. I learned how real creation worked, not in classrooms or pitch decks, but through failure, designs rejected, clients unhappy, deadlines missed. It hurt, but it also hardened me. I became sharper, faster, better. And every time I thought about Ethan, climbing corporate ladders with Dad's applause behind him, I whispered to myself, "I'll build something of my own, something no one can take credit for." Years passed. Ethan rose high VP by 29, married rich, bought a house. At every family gathering, the same comparisons returned like ghosts. Ethan's promotion made the paper. "Did you see his new Tesla? You're next, right?" No one asked if I was happy. They only asked if I was winning. And that is what broke me the most, realizing that, in their eyes, my worth wasn't in who I was, but what I earned. But then something shifted. My startup, the same tiny doodle job Ethan mocked, began growing fast. Our app went viral. Investors noticed. Clients multiplied. Suddenly, I was leading teams, signing contracts, and turning sketches into systems used by millions. Still, I told no one. Not yet. Because ID learned that success spoken too early gets poisoned by other people's opinions. Then came the offer, the one that would change everything. A top-tier company, global scale, $850,000 a year. When I saw the number, I didn't scream. I just stared at the screen, hands trembling, and whispered, "You did it. On your own." I could be called my parents. I could be sent Ethan the offer letter with a smirk. But I didn't he. Because the older I got, the more I understood. Silence holds power. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I'd already won, not in their game, but in mine. The tables turned. Thanksgiving came wrapped in polite smiles and quiet resentments. It was the first time I'd seen Ethan in almost a year. He walked into our parents' house like he owned the place, polished shoes, designer coat, and a smug grin that said he still believed the world revolved around him. I came alone. No entourage, no flashy car, just me, and a bottle of wine ID picked up on the way. The good kind. But I didn't bother mentioning that. They wouldn't notice anyway. As soon as I walked in, Dad's eyes flickered, half surprise, half indifference. "You made it?" he said flatly, patting my shoulder. "Of course," I replied, forcing a smile. "Wouldn't miss the annual family circus." Mom gave a nervous chuckle, pretending not to hear the jab. The table was already set. The turkey was perfect. The atmosphere, tense. It always was. Ethan sat at the head of the table, Daddy's seat. No one corrected him. He started talking before anyone even picked up their forks. About his company's latest deal, his elite client network, his gym routine. Each word carried a layer of self-congratulation. He was performing, and the audience was eating it up. Dad laughed. Mom nodded in admiration. I stayed quiet, chewing slowly, watching. He noticed, of course. He always noticed silence. It made him feel threatened. So, Ethan turned to me mid-bite, smirking. "You still doing those design doodles? What's it called again? User something?" I smiled politely. "User experience design." "Yeah, still doing that." He chuckled, loud enough to make sure everyone heard. "Right, right. Minimum wage art stuff? Glad someone's keeping the dream alive." Dad grinned uncomfortably. Mom whispered, "Ethan, don't to be rude." But he kept going. "No, really, I mean, it's cute. Some people make money, others make screens pretty." He thought he was being clever. The room laughed lightly, nervously, and for the first time in years, I didn't shrink. I didn't look away. I just met his gaze and smiled, a calm, dangerous smile. "You know, Ethan," I said softly, "you were right." "About what?" He smirked. "About making things pretty. That's what I do. I take chaos and make it elegant. Kind of like cleaning up after people who think they're smarter than they are." The table went silent. Mom froze with her fork midair. Ethan blinked, caught off guard. Then he laughed too loud, too forced. "Still the comedian, huh?" I leaned back. "No, just the one who learned that real success doesn't need an audience." Dinner carried on in awkward fragments. Every so often, I'd catch Dad glancing at me curious, maybe even cautious. He'd never seen me so composed, so unbothered. When dessert came, Ethan went for his final show. He pulled out his phone, showing pictures of his new penthouse. Top floor, Manhattan. 6 figures a month. "You should visit sometime." "Oh wait, you probably can't afford the elevator ride." That line landed hard. Mom winced. Even Dad sighed. But I didn't react. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. "Actually," I said quietly, sliding it across the table, "I think I'll manage." He frowned. "What's this? An offer letter?" He unfolded it, expecting maybe a freelance project or a modest raise. Then I saw his face change slowly, painfully, beautifully. His smirk vanished. His jaw clenched. His eyes scanned the numbers again as if they had to be wrong. 850,000, he muttered. Per year, I said casually, sipping my wine. Plus equity, bonuses, relocation. You know how it goes. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Dada's fork hit the plate. Mom gasped softly. Even the ticking of the clock grew loud. Ethan tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked. That is not possible. You? Doing what? Head of design strategy, I said. New York office. The company reached out after my startup got acquired last quarter. His face went pale. He knew that company, everyone in our industry did. Global reputation. Fortune 100. The kind of offer you dream about. I let the silence hang. Then I added, almost kindly, funny thing they found me through the app you once called a waste of time. Mom's eyes welled up. She covered her mouth. Oh, honey, you never told us? Didn't need to, I said softly. It is not the kind of thing you tell people who only listen when you're winning. That one hit. Hard. Dad leaned back, speechless. Ethan looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under him. The golden boy dethroned by the brother he'd mocked for years. For the rest of the evening, no one said much. When I stood to leave, Mom hugged me tight, whispering, I'm proud of you. Dad nodded slowly. For once, no advice, no conditions, just quiet respect. And Ethan? He didn't say a word, but his reflection in the dining room mirror said everything: shock, envy, and something new I hadn't seen in him before. Fear. As I walked out into the cold night, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Hey, can we talk sometime? Maybe grab a drink? I stared at it for a moment, then smiled. Sure, I typed. But this time, Yuri buying. The cost of being right victory is a strange thing. It feels glorious at first, like standing on top of a mountain you spent your whole life climbing. But once the echo of applause fades, you realize something. The higher you climb, the fewer people are there to celebrate with you. The week after Thanksgiving, I moved into my new apartment, a minimalist corner unit overlooking the city skyline. Floor-to-ceiling windows, clean lines, silence, too much silence. I unpacked my things one by one: laptop, coffee maker, notebooks, until I reached the last box. It was labeled home. Inside were old photos, family trips, school awards, and one picture that stopped me cold. It was from our high school graduation, Ethan with his valedictorian medal, arm around my shoulder, me smiling awkwardly beside him. He looked like the winner. I looked like his sidekick. And yet, here I was, $850,000 later, alone in an apartment that echoed every time I breathed. That night, Ethan texted again. Still up? Need to talk. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let him stew in the silence he'd once given me. But another part, the tired, human part, still wanted to understand why he'd always needed to crush me to feel whole. So I said yes. We met at a quiet rooftop bar downtown. When I arrived, he was already there, no arrogance this time, no smirk. Just a man staring into his drink, shoulders heavy. He looked older. Not in years, but in spirit. It startled me, the same brother who once strutted into every room like he owned. The air was now struggling to breathe it. You look good, he said, forcing a smile. You too, I lied. There was a pause, the kind that carries a decade of unspoken words. Finally, he said it. I didn't mean what I said at dinner. You did, I replied. You just didn't mean for me to have the last laugh. He looked down, jaw clenched. Yuri right. The confession didn't sound victorious. It sounded broken. He told me things I'd never known. His job wasn't as secure as he made it seem. His promotion was really a reshuffle after a failed project. The penthouse? Leased. His marriage? Cracking. He admitted that he had been jealous for years, jealous that I seemed content while he was constantly chasing approval that never felt enough. Dad never told you, he said quietly, but he used to show your app to his coworkers. Said you were onto something big? That stunned me. Dad? The same dad who told me to get a real job? Ethan nodded. He just didn't know how to say it to your face. For a moment, the resentment inside me, the one I'd fed for years, trembled. It wanted to crumble. We sat there, two grown men with the ghosts of their childhood between them. No yelling, no competition, just silence, and maybe finally understanding. I realized something that night. Revenge gives you justice, but forgiveness gives you peace. And peace, that's the real luxury. When I got home, I stood by the window, looking down at the city lights. All those people rushing somewhere, chasing something approval, money, recognition, the same things that once owned me. I thought about the kid I used to be, the one who stayed up late sketching ideas no one cared about. He would have been proud. Not for the salary, not for the status, but for the strength it took to stay gentle in a world that rewarded arrogance. A week later, Mom called. "Your brother told me everything," she said softly. "He is different now." Then her voice cracked a little. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. We should have been better parents. I didn't even know what to say. I just listened." It wasn't a grand apology, but it was real. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need to earn their love. It was just there. That weekend, Ethan came over with a small box. Inside was an old photo, the same one from graduation, but this time, framed. He'd written on the back, "Not the sidekick, the foundation." I stared at the words for a long time. Maybe that's what I'd always been, not competing with him, but holding things steady from beneath, waiting for him to grow up enough to see it. Later that night, I sat down and wrote something in my journal, words that had been trapped for years. Being right costs less than being bitter. Winning means nothing if you lose yourself on the way. And sometimes, the best revenge is showing that you turned pain into peace. The power of quiet victories. There is a kind of peace that doesn't make noise. It doesn't announce itself with applause or headlines. It doesn't need validation or followers. It just arrives quietly, like morning sunlight slipping through the blinds after a long, sleepless night. That is what my life felt like now. Quiet victory. Months passed after that Thanksgiving. Work was intense, 12-hour days, constant deadlines, board meetings with people who spoke in millions and moved in seconds. But I wasn't the same timid kid anymore. I spoke with confidence, led teams with empathy. And when younger designers came to me, nervous about being not enough, I saw myself in their eyes and told them what I wish someone had told me years ago: "You don't have to be the loudest to matter." Ethan and I kept in touch, not as rivals, but as brothers finally learning how to exist in the same space. He started therapy, changed jobs, moved out of that penthouse he could barely afford, and bought a modest house near the coast. One evening, he called me while watching the sunset. "You know," he said quietly, "it is strange. For the first time, I feel free." "From what?" I asked. "From needing to be better than you." We both laughed, the kind of laugh that heals something invisible inside. When I visited our parents next, the energy was different. No comparisons. No subtle insults disguised as advice. Just a family finally learning to be a family. Dad took me aside after dinner. "You know," he said, "I didn't understand what you did for a long time, but I watched one of your interviews last week." He smiled, a bit embarrassed. "You spoke well. You've built something real. I am proud of you, son." That word proud hit harder than I expected. For years, I'd chased it like oxygen. Now that I didn't need it anymore, it found me. Later that night, I walked into my old room. Everything was smaller than I remembered: the desk where I'd drawn my first designs, the cracked lamp I'd fixed 100 times, the ceiling with glow-in-the-dark stars that still faintly shimmered. It felt like visiting the ghost of who I used to be. And instead of sadness, I felt gratitude. Because every insult, every doubt, every "you all never make it" had quietly built the backbone I stood on now. A few weeks later, my company flew me to a leadership summit. Hundreds of innovators, executives, founders, the best of the best. I was asked to speak on the future of design thinking. But when I stood on that stage, I didn't talk about technology. I talked about people, about failure, about the cost of always needing to prove yourself. We spend so much time trying to be seen, I told the audience, that we forget to see ourselves. And sometimes, the quietest work, the kind no one applauds, is the most powerful. When I finished, the room went silent, then erupted in applause. But the thing that stayed with me wasn't the sound. It was the calm in my chest. After the event, I walked out onto the balcony. The city glittered below, endless and alive. I took a deep breath and smiled to myself. Not because ID won, but because ID stopped fighting. That was the real victory, not the money, not the title, but the peace that came from knowing I had nothing left to prove. A few days later, Ethan texted again, a photo of him volunteering at a community kitchen, sleeves rolled up, grinning. "Trying out your version of success," he wrote. I laughed. Maybe he'd have finally figured it out too, that success isn't measured in applause, but in quiet contribution. That night, I sat at my desk, opened my journal, and wrote the last words of a chapter that had taken me a lifetime to finish. I forgive him. I forgive them. I forgive me. The boy they called a loser became a man who stopped keeping score. And that's the power of quiet victories. They don't shout. They endure. The next morning, sunlight filled my apartment. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't wake up chasing anything. I just existed. Calm, grateful, free.